So I spent a ton of last season playing Jeff for footage, and now I'm starting this season playing Jeff for even more footage, and I wanted to play Blade or Thor or something, goddammit. Yeah, I didn't think I'd be talking about Jeff again so soon, but alright. This is definitely significant enough to warrant it. Jeff's ultimate now leaves an 8-meter radius healing pool at the point of activation that heals allies within range for 100 health per second and lasts for 8 seconds. Downright terrible, huh? Yeah, I really don't think there's anything good about Jeff's new ultimate. Even if Jeff ends up seriously benefiting from the change, it's still an incredibly disappointing decision, especially after the slam dunk that was the initial Jeff rework. This is the kind of balance change that would be a joke for how unfortunate of an idea it is. Except it's real, and I don't think most players have fully grasped what this means for the game quite yet. And even if it turns out I'm overblowing things, it's still a bad, disappointing band-aid solution to a problem that needs way more serious attention. So I'm going to start off by giving a review of Jeff's new ultimate and how I think it works with the rest of his kit, and then move on to explaining why exactly I think this change is so disappointing and potentially even disastrous. Now, when I first got my hands on Jeff's new ultimate, I bounced off of it hard. It seemed like it was the worst, most awkward version of a defensive ult, but while I do still think it has its awkwardness, it eventually did click, and I can see how it can be potent. When I talked about Jeff in my last video, I brought up that the new Jeff has 3 playstyles. You have full support Jeff, who likes to position extremely passively, DPS Jeff, who positions aggressively such that he virtually can't support his team, and intermittent Jeff, who likes to position aggressively but in such a way that he can still support his team. The mistake I was making was leaning into the wrong playstyle. When I play Jeff and I'm not trying my ass off, I generally like to play him more passively, focusing entirely on supporting my team from a distance. But that's just not how the new ultimate wants you to play. Because the new healing circle is small and static, it's very awkward to use with this kind of passive positioning. If you want to make the most out of Jeff's new ult, you need to be playing towards the front, ready to jump in and pop it at the opportune moment. So that was the first hurdle down, but there are still more complications with the ult. A defensive ultimate generally has 3 uses, and I'm sure we can poke holes in the examples I'm about to provide and argue plenty about how they overlap, but for our purposes this is what we're going with. You can use them to secure or enable a push or hold, to save essential teammates from dying, or to counter an enemy's ultimate. Now, the tiny radius of the healing circle limits how you can use it. It's basically worthless for pushing, and awkward to use for holding because it's fairly easy for the enemy team to muscle people off of it. But it can do just fine and even excel in the other 2 uses. With other defensive ults, using it to push, hold, or save people isn't always advisable because of how important these ultimates are for countering the game's other ultimates. But the thing with the new Jeff ult is that they didn't change his ult charge at all, so Jeff still gets it pretty fast. This means, unlike the other defensive ultimates, Jeff's is downright disposable, so using it for things other than counter-ulting is far more advisable, especially if you're running him in a triple support comp. And in the scenario where you are counter-ulting, Jeff can be easily relied upon to have his ult whenever you need it. Plus, with a Jeff ready to jump in and save your tanks with his healing circle, the other supports can more comfortably save their ultimates for when they really need them. Which is all well and good, but unlike the other defensive ults in the game, Jeff also has another half to his ultimate. You know, the part where he eats people. This aspect of his ultimate has gone completely unchanged, which is a decision that definitely has its ups and downs. Ups, and that eating people as Jeff is hilarious, and downs, and that this part of Jeff's kit mostly sucks and really gets in the way of using his new healing circle. The positions where you simultaneously want to use a healing circle and use Jeff's ult are kind of uncommon, and this leads to a little problem. There are going to be plenty of times where you want to use Jeff's ult, or more often when you want to use the healing circle, but you don't have a plan for what to do with the other half of the ultimate, and that can leave you in an awkward position. particularly if you're using it for the healing circle. You can't just swallow enemies willy-nilly. It's not going to accomplish anything. You need to be keeping track of enemy cooldowns and go for people you know can't escape. And you also need to try and catch people in positions where A, you can actually accomplish something by eating them, and B, you won't just get instantly focused and die the moment you resurface. All of that is very hard to do on the fly, and while the more aggressive positioning the ultimate now encourages does help with that, it's still very easy to get yourself or your team killed, because there's yet another quirk with this ultimate. The healing circle's duration is completely separate from the other half of the ultimate, and you can spend quite a bit longer than 8 seconds using it. This means that the biggest problem with Jeff's ultimate has gone virtually unaddressed. Your team is still down a support for the duration. All put together, you need a lot of things to line up if you want this ultimate to perform to its fullest potential. Unless you're landing a fat Jeff ult where you swallow 3 or more people, to get good value out of all aspects of the ultimate, you need either injured allies worth saving or an enemy ult worth countering, enemies that you can swallow, and a convenient death pit to chuck them in, all within very short range of each other so you don't leave your team down a player for too long. Outside of these specific scenarios, things get a lot more awkward and a lot more risky. Coming up with people to eat on the fly when you ult is awkward enough, but having to figure out what to do with the eaten targets on the fly is another world of stress entirely. Now, if you're lucky, you're gonna have a team good enough to capitalize on the weakness you just opened up by removing 1 or more enemies from the fight, allowing you to get plenty of value before you even have to spit the enemies out. But let's be real here, you're not. So where does that leave you? Well, if the enemies you swallowed were on low health, you could just wait for the tick damage to kill them, but that's not likely to happen too often. Historically, one of the best times to use Jeff's ult has been to use it when an enemy support ults, because of how the enemy team is going to be bunched up around their support. And now you're encouraged to do this even more because Jeff's ult now functions as a counter ult. But if you use it then there aren't going to be any enemies on low health. In the absence of a death pit, you could use Jeff's ult to simply throw enemies into a really bad position, but unless you can leave them in a really out-of-the-way spot and they don't have any movement abilities to quickly get back to their team, that's not going to achieve anything either unless your teammates collapse on those enemies for you. And these use cases have further problems. If you want to throw someone in an awkward position, you need to spend time getting there, which means you may run out the timer for the healing circle and leave your teammates at risk. If you have teammates capitalizing on the enemies you forced out of position, then those teammates aren't putting their attention on the front line, which is yet more risk. Waiting for tick damage to kill enemies you swallowed takes time, which could run out the healing circle. And again, all of this is assuming the enemy team doesn't counter-ult you, escape the ult, and/or focus the hell out of you the moment you resurface. If you aren't using the new Jeff ult in the perfect scenario, coordinating very well, or playing in a triple support comp where being down a support isn't as big a deal, this is way more risky than any other healing circle, and that opens up a bit of a temptation. A lot of the time, it may be best to just waste the other half of the ult and continue supporting your team as normal. Yeah, you missed out on potential value with eating people, but you also skirt the risk, and can get value in other ways. With a healing circle backing your team up, you can switch modes to DPS Jeff for a bit, potentially stanking a kill, forcing a cooldown, or even forcing an ultimate, all for way less risk than trying to eat with the ult. This can be valuable, of course, but there's a big problem with it. It's really fucking lame. And that there is the biggest problem with the new Jeff ult. It's just lame. There are so many times where you want to go to ult for a big eat, but you don't because you know using the ult for the healing circle is just better. In making Jeff's ultimate another healing circle, they've taken all of the wacky fun out of it. Sure, you could just pretend the healing circle isn't there, but there's still the knowledge that you're basically trolling hanging over you, and your teammates definitely aren't going to appreciate being down a defensive ult either. Really, it makes Jeff's ultimate, one of the most unique abilities in the game, feel no different than any other support ult. And therein lies the biggest problem with this change. So we see that Jeff's new healing circle differs from the other healing circles in a few ways, but that doesn't mean it isn't just another healing circle, and it also doesn't mean it's not going to feel the same to play around a lot of the time. Now I'm sure some of you have been thinking for a while something along the lines of, but it's only 100 healing per second. That's actually considerably less than every other healing circle ult. Which is true, but outside of certain edge cases, it does not matter. Cloak and Dagger's bubble provides 55 healing per second, and this is enough to make you virtually immune to most forms of damage. Most characters piloted by most people cannot kill through C&D bubble, and Jeff's healing circle has nearly double its numbers. So sure, there are things that can kill you through Jeff's ult that couldn't kill through a different healing circle, but the majority of the time it's not going to feel any different. And this feeds into one of, if not the biggest problems in Rivals. A few months ago, I put out a video called Marvel Rivals' Biggest Problem, where I outlined the issues with the game's support experience. Now I stand by nearly everything I said in that video, but regarding the biggest problem in Marvel Rivals, I do think I missed the mark just a tad. The biggest problem in Marvel Rivals is its ultimates, because they make every team fight feel the same. Every single support ult, with the exception of Adam Warlock and Loki, is basically the same. They all function slightly differently, but when you break them down, they all work to make one or more of the support's teammates basically impossible to kill for a few seconds. This means the support's role in a big team fight where everybody is trading ultimates back and forth is almost always going to be the same. For the majority of the supports, you're either going to strengthen a push or hold and force an enemy response, save a teammate to prolong the fight, or counter an enemy's ultimate. This makes the support experience feel extremely one-note, as even the weirder supports like Ultron and now Jeff all fulfill this same function. But it's not a lack of creativity on the part of the devs that has led to this. Well, not just that, anyway. The support ults kind of have to function this way because of the game's high damage numbers and the sheer absurdity of its offensive ultimates. Characters like Black Panther, Magic, Winter Soldier, and Squirrel Girl can kill you absurdly quickly just by themselves, while characters like Storm, Psylocke, Star-Lord, and Doctor Strange can kill you way faster than most people can reasonably be expected to react to just by ulting. You want this because you want your characters, and especially their ultimates, to feel powerful. But we are still playing a video game here, so you don't want the team fight to end the moment someone pops off once, or uses an offensive ultimate. Therefore, it tracks that there should be a one-button solution so people can react instantly and keep the fight going, right? One with a cost, of course, so fights can actually end, but still one button. So far, well, not good, but it does work. The system is balanced, but it's not exactly stimulating to play. Every team fight more or less just comes down to trading ultimates back and forth until one side doesn't have a counter, which I guess is just a part of the genre to an extent, but it's far more extreme here. In Rivals, you're basically just not going to win a fight if the enemy has defensive ultimates up, and the best way to force them is with an offensive one. So, ironically, despite what was clearly the intention by the developers, the ultimates don't really feel exciting. Using an ultimate and having it swing a fight in these games should be a hype moment, because not only is the ability itself cool, it's a reward for having the right timing, positioning, game sense, and plain luck. But in Rivals, half the time your ultimate is just going to do nothing because the enemy popped a defensive ult, and when you do get an ult through and it wins a fight, it's not going to feel like anything because, yeah, of course it won the fight. These abilities are absurd. A 5-year-old could pull this off. So just like how most of the support roster have ultimates that do the same thing, most of the offensive ults will only ever serve two purposes: forcing a defensive ultimate or ending a fight. So what does all this have to do with Jeff's ultimate? Well, Jeff's ultimate was an outlier in that it was an offensive ultimate that generally didn't end fights by itself, but rather could be used to get picks or at least strategically remove certain targets from the fight for the duration, unless you used it in a particularly impactful way. It didn't work great, but it was different, and it had some other weird wildcard uses as well. However, it's now been dumbed down into another ult that fits into our much more narrow roles. And by turning Jeff's ultimate, one of the more unique abilities in the game, into another defensive ult, the devs have shown commitment to this status quo. Now, it could be that this is the developers' intention with the game, but that's not the impression I get. If this was, we likely would have seen the healing circle pushed with Jeff's rework instead of being tacked on later down the line. No, I think it's much more likely that this is just where the developers have found themselves, and they kinda just need to work with it. Hopefully just until they find the time to address the problem properly. And I think we can trust the developers to understand that this is a problem because it puts a pretty nasty restriction on their potential character designs. If a support doesn't have a defensive ultimate, it kind of feels like ass having them on your team, because having defensive ultimates ready to go is so important for this game's balance. At the very least, it is for the average skill level. So when designing a support character with the average player in mind, you kind of have to include a defensive ultimate in their kit, and this greatly limits the creativity in designing a support kit, on top of all of the other design restrictions the supports face in this game. So what I'm saying, and hoping, is the Jeff Healing Circle is a band-aid solution to the problem of Jeff's ultimate not bringing enough to his team. But this problem does not need band-aid solutions. The problem with this game's ultimates needs decisive action, and I think it needs it soon. Because people can forgive things like the problems with the support experience, but it's a lot harder to excuse so many of the game's ultimates being virtually the same, or most fights playing out basically the same. I love this game. I really do. It's a ton of fun, it looks great, it feels great to play for the most part, and it has a lot of personality and charm. But I don't think it's going to have much longevity with a problem like this, especially when the devs don't seem eager to fix it. And that is why I think this balance change is downright terrible. Okay, so we're back once again for the notes at the end of the video. Real quick, before I say anything else, I was having some issues with the audio when making this video. So if it sounds like ass, leave a comment. Right? So this video was supposed to be out way sooner. It was supposed to be out last month. But the script for this video was just absolutely whooping my ass for like a month. So that was fun. That felt really good to want to get that video out and then just to be completely stumped by the script for a month. But oh well, it happens. My plan is to get one more video out, at least one more video out before the end of the year. Ideally, I can get one out in November and one out in December, but, you know, like with the holidays, that's probably not going to happen. So, yeah, one more. One more video out before the end of the year. I am kind of torn whether or not to make it another video on Rivals, or if I want to do it on another video on hero shooters in general. We'll see what I land on. I haven't quite decided yet. So stay tuned for that. So last time I said that I wanted to eventually make game reviews at some point. Not saying I was going to transition my content entirely to that, but that I wanted to do them as just like a little fun side thing. And I think I know what the first one is going to be, and it's going to be out early next year. So I'm not going to say what it is, but you know, if you're watching the gameplay right now, I might have changed my mind as to what game I showed, but it should be a subtle little hint as to what game I'm going to be covering. So that's the future plans for the channel, and I wanted to just say a couple more things before I closed out. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the music in this video. I A lot of you probably recognize some of it. It's from the soundtrack for Deus Ex, the original, not Mankind Divided, which is a really good soundtrack, and it is also really like generic. And I ummed and erred a lot about using it. Like every fucking 2-bit video essayist on YouTube uses the Deus Ex soundtrack, especially the last track I used, which I think is the Declare Chateau music. I'm not looking at it right now. I think it's the music for Declare Chateau, which fucking everybody uses. Like two like YouTubers I've been following for years have used that track several times, and now this is the second time I've used it. But it is a really good soundtrack for this kind of content, so oh well. So I'm still taking music suggestions. I put that in the description of the last video, but I don't, nobody reads descriptions, so of course nobody responded. So I'm still taking music suggestions, so if you got any, please share. I would really appreciate it. But anyway, so so I have over 2,000 subscribers now. I might have had that before. I don't remember. But 2,000 subscribers is, quite frankly, a lot, considering I've been doing this for less than a year. And people say when they're talking about numbers on the internet like this, to say, imagine a room full of 2,000 people. And it kind of gets to a point when even that stops kind of giving you perspective. But my brother actually was saying to me, imagine like standing at the head of a conference hall, and there's 2,000 people in it, and all of them want to hear what you have to say, and that kind of like that fucking fueled my ego with that threw jet fuel onto my ego, like that kind of really helped me understand how insane this is that this has happened. And another crazy thing is that I'm in the month of October, hopefully in the month of October, assuming I understand what's happening and nothing goes wrong, I'm going to be getting my first chunk of money from doing YouTube, which is crazy. That's literally a dream come true, to make a little bit of money off of YouTube. This isn't going to be a job quite yet, but it's still just wild that it happened, And it makes me feel, I don't really know. It just feels completely. I have gotten farther in this handful of months than I thought I was going to get in years, and yeah. So I'm gonna be making I have this money is from ad revenue, and I'm not gonna sell out, or I will absolutely sell out if someone wants to sponsor me. I would do that, but I'm not gonna what am I trying to say? Basically, I'm not just doing this solely for the money, I guess. So I'm not gonna what I'm trying to say is I'm not gonna start a Patreon or accept channel memberships until I know I can do this as a job. Especially also just because that feels really fucking tacky if I were to do that now. But I just wanted to say how fucking bonkers wild it is that I'm going to be this little hobby I picked up over the summer is going to be making me a little bit of money. I've had a lot of hobbies. I'm big into Warhammer. If it'd be I've what am I trying to say? I'm big into Warhammer, and I haven't made shit off of that. So just having made any money at all and knowing that people respond to this is kind of a lot more than I was expecting, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So if you liked this video, please like and subscribe. I would really, really appreciate that. Consider sticking around and following my other uploads. Like I said, I'm going to be putting out a game review early next year, and there's going to be one more video out before the end of the year, hopefully. so you can look forward to that. I'm going to be putting out more like game design video essays like this, so I'm not completely dropping them in favor of game reviews. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you next time.